well, one of many tools inside of School Links, but the scattergram would be the kind of a nice tool to check to see if this is a realistic goal for me, or if is this a reach, or is this a safe school, what have you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. O'Donnell, same to you. At the middle school level, Dr. Clark as well, how does that conversation occur at the middle school? Because that's when students really need to be thinking about that. If I am thinking about a selective school, I need to start taking some courses in middle school that are going to put me on that pathway. Dr. Clark?
So when we get students on School Links when they're in middle school, again, the focus is to provide them exposure and then support them as they navigate and research some of the schools that are all the schools that are on the platform, and helping them work backwards as they move towards the high school and work with their counselor at the high school, so they're not going in not having thought about it, not being exposed to that prior to being in high school. So the goal really at the middle school being exposure, and then supporting them as they make that transition to high school.
All right, thank you very much, team. At this time, I'd like to invite up our next team, the secondary time usage team. And working to advance the slide. All right. And Mrs. Jensen, if you could start with the introductions, please.
Sure. Pam Jensen, Senior Director of Professional Learning.
Jim Richter, Principal at St. Charles East High School.
Melinda Roberts, Assistant Principal at St. Charles North.
Kara Erdmeyer, School Counselor at St. Charles North.
Kara Drexler, English Department Chair at St. Charles East.
Carrie Grabowski, Math Teacher at Thompson Middle School.
Well, thank you very much for having us here tonight to provide an update since our last update in April. And we are using the same question that has really guided all of our work, which is how do we use our instructional time with students? As we think about the strategic priorities, we have highlighted the ones that we have really leaned into while we've been doing this work. As you see our recommendations throughout this presentation, you will most likely see evidence of those priorities. We also had a very collaborative and dedicated team of educators that were from both of the high schools as well as both of the middle schools. They also came with very different expertise levels, and many of them are presenting tonight, but I would also like to take a minute to recognize the people in our audience who were also a part of this committee. So if you could please stand, be recognized. Thank you. Okay, so as we looked at the scope of our work, on the left-hand side, you will see the components that we had in our charge statement. Since April, we have been able to develop structure recommendations that you will see here next based on the feedback from our secondary colleagues. And we were also able to identify professional learning needs that we are then going to pass along to the next committee who's going to take this work up. And that committee will be working on really looking at the scheduling for both our middle schools and high schools.
Got to get used to this. Sorry about it. In response to our gap analysis, we are recommending the implementation of an advisory structure. This structure would include a developmentally differentiated curriculum designed to address the social, emotional, and academic skills needed of our students at each grade level.
In response to some of our identified needs related to supporting students in their perseverance towards meeting academic achievement goals, another time structure we are recommending is a what I need period. A what I need structure is a dedicated period of time with dynamic student placement to provide students targeted academic support.
We also recommend the implementation of time dedicated for students to access and receive support with college and career exploration and post-secondary planning.
This recommendation aligns perfectly with the implementation of the PACE framework, which emphasizes the importance of robust college and career preparation and exploration. By allocating specific time, we ensure every student has the opportunity to recognize, research, and explore their interests, as well as the various pathways to achieve their subsequent goals, and develop a personalized plan for their future. While this dedicated time is not different or additional from the aforementioned recommendations and can be seamlessly integrated into the previously proposed advisory and WIN structures, we want to emphasize the need for time in the school day for students to plan for, achieve, and attain ambitious goals. These structures provide natural opportunities for students to access resources, connect with counselors and teachers, and receive individualized guidance on their college and career journeys. Ultimately, providing dedicated time for post-secondary planning is a crucial step in preparing our students for success beyond high school. It's an investment in our students' futures and empowers them to make informed decisions and confidently pursue their first choice post-secondary aspirations.
The committee also identified 3 educator center gaps. These gaps focused on the professional development and time required for our educators to support the academic needs of our students, the social-emotional needs of our students, and the use of data to meet the needs of individual students. Within all of these areas, PLCs, professional development regarding SEL skills, and professional development regarding the use of student data. The work will be accomplished through working with our principals within our existing school improvement structures, our existing PLC processes, and the next scheduling committee's work.
So as Melinda mentioned, the next steps in our process will be to identify a new committee who will take the recommendations from our team and move that work forward. Once staff returns in August, they will be invited to express interest in that committee, whose purpose will be to research, identify, and plan for the implementation of school schedules for the middle and high schools. This will be in support of and a continuation of the Secondary Schools Time Usage Committee work focused on alignment with students' academic needs and post-secondary goals. Listed on this slide is a draft charge statement for that committee's work. That committee's schedule recommendation will come back to the Board of Education in June of 2026, and quarterly updates will be provided to the board during the 25-26 school year.
At this time, we're curious about the insights you have to share.
Okay, so just to be, I'm just trying to be clear. So you're done, and I like that you have a charge statement for the next group. With your recommendations, these are things that are already in place, at least the time during the school day. You're not suggesting what that should look like. You're going to let the committee make those kinds of decisions. PLCs are already in place. My question will be to the next committee, how do we hold PLCs accountable to what you're recommending? You're not telling us how to do that. You're saying that's the next committee's work. The same way with how will students find time during the school day to meet with their counselors. You're making that as a figure out how to do this to the next group. Thank you very much.
Can I follow up though on that? Like as far as the time to meet for post-secondary planning, they do that today. So how is the recommendation different? I guess that's where I'm lost. Like, we even heard earlier, right? The seniors, for example, they meet already with the counselors to go over their plans, et cetera. So I'm trying to connect the dots on under the achievement one. What is this? Is this additional time?
It might be, or it might be something that is worked into the advisory or the what I need period. So in terms of like how it happens right now, we struggle. What happens is that very often it happens during English classes, is just kind of the reality of how it happens, because right now, they're, with the way the curriculum works, and there's lots of student choice in terms of like which classes they take during which years and which pathways they're on, the one course that every student takes is English, all 4 years. So all the freshmen are together in a freshman class, and all the sophomores are together in a sophomore class. And so those English classes, at the same time that they're trying to meet all of those rigorous, you know, reading, writing, speaking goals that we have for our students, we're also taking a day here, a day there, you know, here and there. And it's we know that it's important for our students, and so we do it, but it ends up kind of derailing some of the work of the PLCs and the curriculum that we've already put in. So we just want to make it really something that we're intentional about making sure that we're making specific time for.
Okay, so that piece, but then also the individual sessions are still happening as they are today. Okay, so really the focus for this is around how do we structure the group time, is what I'm hearing. The other piece stays the same?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. I think one of the things that we're recognizing is that the depth of these conversations really need to be a little bit more deep.
Yeah.
And so, rather than us finding the ways to sort of go through the process and say, check, we did these things, we really want to do them, more effectively, more deeply. And some of that can come through more of a classroom-based lesson from a college and career person, or sometimes those are going to be more tailored towards an individual conversation with students, and just protecting that time in the school day, the structure of our school day, to be able to engage in those conversations either collectively or individually more effectively is something that I think would benefit all of our students as well.
Okay, so you guys are thinking you're going to need incremental time. You're going to need additional time. I thought I was confused then. I thought I heard earlier there was no additional time that was going to be needed for this. So we're going to add time.
Yes, so I'm sorry.
No, I wanted to clarify, are you talking about additional minutes in the school day? Like,
No,
okay.
somehow
Okay.
we're going to add more time to get this achievement one in particular, the college career exploration, secondary planning. We're going
Yes.
to add more time.
Yes.
That's dedicated to
We're going
that.
to, yes, we're going to dedicate more time specifically to that.
Okay.
Within that, it could be in the advisory or the WIN structure. So when I say there's no additional there's not 3 time structures necessarily that we're recommending. It's the advisory and WIN structure, and the time for post-secondary and career exploration could be built into those 2 time structures.
And then it would be required of the student?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to say, as probably the only person sitting up here who's recently taught high school, I'm in full support of an advisory period. The connection to a consistent and caring adult and small group of people that builds community and trust and a sense of belonging that has to be like top tier priority. So I'm thrilled. I think that it will be beneficial for English teachers to not lose time in their day. And there's so much work that has gone into this PACE guide, and in order to properly implement something like that, you need dedicated time in the school day. So I thank you. I also thank you for using win time as a consistent. This is something that students will know and remember from elementary school, that this is a part of their day that's dedicated to helping them be successful. And continuing that on to high school, I think, is really smart, and I'm excited to see that be implemented. I know that this is not in your charge statement per se, and that you won't be the ones that are actually developing a new schedule, but please don't do this first period, right? I mean, at the high school level, we can't ask students, we can't expect 100% attendance first period. It doesn't happen. And so if it's something where it's like around third hour before people start leaving for other classes and going across town or across river or whatever it might be, just that's something that gets communicated to the next group as they're trying to build a schedule and to implement this in an effective way, time usage. But thank you for all of your work.
The only thing I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So we've talked about 3 different time-consuming blocks, We've talked about the fact that English has been the course that has been burdened with these. We know from the SAR that our English scores are some of the better scores on standardized tests for our high school students. From which classes would this time be taken? Which classroom instruction time would be reduced in order to enable this to take place?
I think that the next committee, as they come together, will figure out what structure will best meet these needs, whether it's looking at a couple of minutes from each class period, whether it's daily, whether it's a couple of times a week. I think that's really the work of the next committee. So I don't know that we can confidently say exactly where it's going to come from, but we know if we're bound to our current time frame of our start and end time, we do have to find a way to leverage that time away from something. And that next committee will take the work that we've done, the recommendations. I do anticipate that there will be members of the current committee who will be interested in serving in that next committee as well, so that the spirit and the spirit behind the conversations can continue on with honoring where the work has been, but also then folding in and integrating those new ideas that the new team members will bring in, so that not all of that momentum is lost. We're able to kind of capitalize on that, work together more efficiently, and then be able to make that recommendation back to the board in next June. So to give you an answer of where it's going to be, I don't know that any one of us could confidently say it's going to be from this class, from that class. But if we're going to integrate this into our day, we're going to have to really consider, is this something that we want to leverage on a daily basis? Is this a couple times a week? What does this look like, so we can make sure we are maximizing our instruction in our classrooms, while at the same time finding the time to really do this very important work as well.
So if I hear you rightly, though, there will be a reduction of some other class time in order to dedicate it to this time. Is that right?
If our current constraints are the current start and end times for our school day, I don't see how it would be possible to do it without that.
Thank you. Ms. Fairgrieve?
Can I also just quickly add, I apologize to interrupt. One of the things that we also recognize that our aspirational districts, New Trier and Stevenson specifically, have these structures embedded within their schedules. And so that's something that this next scheduling committee will be reviewing and analyzing, in addition to other potential schedules or options, to see how are other schools doing this, how have they built this in addition to what is accomplished within those structures. Will be things that this next committee and the subsequent work that we do with implementation will address.
Pardon me, Ms. Fairgrieve, can I have a redirect on that one?
Yeah.
So how much of the gap between those aspirational districts' high school performance and D303's performance will these three actions close? So if I hear you rightly, the supposition is aspirational districts have this, it will have a positive lift on student outcomes. Is that about right?
That is,
if that's so, then how much?
And I respect that question, and I can't have an answer for you right now, but it is something that we can definitely explore in terms of what is that growth or that percentage or that change over time. One of the things we do know is that they do have higher academic scores than us, and so as we explore next year and work in our research, those are people that we are reaching. We did this year as well, but we'll continue to reach out to hear how do they structure that, what are the components of that, what did they feel caused them success with those particular academic supports and SEL supports, so that we can tap into that as well.
That was a similar question to what I had. The only thing I would just comment to take forward for the new team, I think it'll be very interesting to see with whatever the recommendation is, where the instruction time is being taken, and just kind of a matrix or charting of how that looks. I do think it's great to see the structure around the win. We did something like that at North at one point in time, and then that was changed with some of our agreements, union agreements, but it'll be nice to see something back and consistently among both high schools. So.
Can I build on that point? Because I think, there's all kinds of words on these slides that say dedicated time and dedicated period of time, but there are a couple of others that say consistent and caring adult in a small group setting. And so when I hear that conversation, I think, resource-wise, we have only the minutes that we have contractually available to us at present until the term of the contract is up, or we have a significant financial burden to consider in order to expand that time. Those are real constraints. There are other constraints when I see words like consistent caring adult. That means some person who is consistently attached to, as you guys put it, small group. Small group and consistent means lots of people, lots of adults in the room with fewer numbers of kids. And so as we think about this scheduling construct, it's not only the minutes, it's the minutes and the resources. And so as we think about those aspirational districts, I think we have to look hard at the minutes that they set aside and the profile of the people who are responsible for delivering the student experience in those minutes. Each of those, for me to get comfortable with any of these, would have to be really well brought back to the board, because each has a trade-off in terms of student outcomes, meaning a reduction of classroom teaching time. And I understand we're managing some of this by hook or crook or by the extraction of teaching time in English classes, if that's the place today. But let's have a better understanding of where that extraction is coming from today, and therefore what the potential outcome would be. First period totally makes sense to avoid. Maybe math class makes, since we have gaps to close in math, maybe that's not the place for us to take the time. So let's have a good look and a proposition of from whence that time might come within the constraints that we face.
And,
Go ahead.
and I think it's also important that the amount of money that other districts are aspirational are paying per student, or cost per student, is much higher than ours. Is this an area where they spend more money per student than we do? And that is going to be, that could be a very critical piece for us. If all of a sudden they have, I'm just pulling a number, they have 50 more counselors to do the small group work, and we don't, we have to weigh as a board, I'm sounding like Mr. Lackner now, is there an impact that is it worth that amount, or are we losing out on some other things that we could use? So I think it isn't about we don't believe that, it's that we just have a finite amount of money, and where are we going to be able to spend that money? So I think that's part of it as well, because we have a different lens than just having, we would love to have all the people supporting kids. We just don't have the same money that our aspirational districts might have.
Schedule-wise, at the aspirational districts that you did reach out to and talk to about their advisory periods, are they on an 8-period schedule? Are they on a hybrid? Are they on a block schedule? What does that look like? Because I think it's a little easier to build this kind of time in when you have a block schedule, because as we all know, we're spending 49 minutes of our day walking from class to class. 49 minutes, if you cut down how many class periods you're meeting, you just got 25 minutes of win time or advisory period. And I'm not saying block schedule is the answer or that it's an everyday answer, but certainly seems like that's a good way to build it in a couple times. Is that what they're doing?
What we found interesting is that, for example, Stevenson is on a traditional 8-period day with embedded advisory and academic supports, and New Trier is on a modified block, also with the same structures in place. And so they're each doing the same structures or providing the same supports to students, but just in different ways. And I think that's part of the research that our team will be doing next year, is looking at how do other schools do that, what types of schedules best support students in closing the gaps, but also in continuing to pursue academic success as well as college and career readiness.
If we see obvious constraints in terms of budget and people and headcount, I hope we have the forethought to add to the team's charge to get creative about ways to implement the approach. So if it is, if it is 50 counselors and we can't afford that in the budget that we have, then what are some creative ways that the team can bring back to the board for consideration?
I appreciate all of the conversation, and is why we're taking this incredibly slowly. We're being very thoughtful, because all the board's questions are the right questions to be asking. We have to spend time with this, really understand each and every one of the components around time. as Mr. Lackner said. So if we're adding something within a 7-hour day, we're not expanding our day to 8 hours. We have this work time. What does that look like? That's an exploration. The consideration around finances, what does that look like? How do we manage all these different pieces? Block scheduling, what does that look like? It could look really good in this scenario, but these 5 other scenarios, they may not work. But what I'm hopeful for is giving this team that time, the necessary time to really think it through and continuously bring back to the board updates. This is going to be one that is really key, that the board's highly aware of as we're walking down these pathways. What are the pieces we're learning step by step, and making sure that our board and our community are aware of where we're going along the way. This will be whatever that recommendation is by the next committee next June. It will be another committee who takes that on to look at the implementation of that. So at the earliest, you're talking about 2 more school years before we even implement it in that 3rd year. So we are being very diligent, very thoughtful about what are those next steps. We do recognize there are some aspects that we're missing within our current schedule. What does that look like? And I lean back into Mr. Lackner. There are going to be some things that people are going to come to us and say, we need this dollars, but are there other ways to accomplish that? As our staff knows, we have a very tight budget currently, and I don't see that loosening up anytime soon. So we will have to be creative. It may not be exactly as Nutrier or Stevenson, as Mrs. McCabe so eloquently defined it, is they're very different per student ratios than St. Charles School District is. But I'm excited about the time, the methodology that we're using to bring back solid findings of our work.
Dr. Gordon, I'd just like to add something. I know you were wrapping us up there too, but something that you said made me think about this a little bit. And I think for a tool like this, having gone to New Trier, and I know that their philosophy is essentially and I was no valedictorian, let's put it this way, I wasn't going to Princeton or Harvard or anything. But I think the philosophy of a tool like this needs to be that whatever best outcome we can get for each individual student, right? So if there's a decent student like myself, right? How can I get into a moderately selective institution if that's my goal? How can the outcome be the best it can be for me? Not my counterpart taking 15 APs with a 5.0, right? And then how do we get those individuals to the highest selected institutions? Or if people want to go into industry, or how are we best preparing them so that each of our students is getting the very best potential outcome for what they're able to do, right? Or what their academic level would provide. And so I think if we think about this tool from that philosophical lens, not just, some folks think that we just want to get everybody into Princeton. That is not, at least speaking from my perspective, our goal, right? It's setting them up for the best potential outcome that they are capable of achieving. And if each student is doing that, then we're going to get the lift as a district, right? We're going to be known as a district that can get students to the places that they're capable of being in, and maybe a slight stretch from where they would have been able to get without a tool like this. And so just what you said made that kind of dawn on me a little bit. And if we're utilizing this as the effective tool that I believe it can be, I think that's exactly what will happen, especially if it's tailored to each individual. So thanks.
I want to thank our teams for presenting this evening. And I also want to remind the board, throughout our presentation today, we talked about updates coming back. And so in October, there will be an update coming back for the APG, as well as having that being prepared and approved for use for students in November. We also talked about an update from the College and Career Planning team regarding the implementation of School Links and the PACE framework in November, as well as a follow-up update in June of 2026, following the solicitation of feedback from parents and families and students in regard to school links and PACE work and its ease and use and ways to improve. And then finally, as we move into the scheduling committee time, they will be providing quarterly updates along with their recommendation in June of 2026. So your insights this evening have been incredibly helpful to help us in steering and guiding that work and really honing in on specific areas of research. And those are the things you can anticipate in the updates as they come quarterly from the scheduling committee as we approach next year.
I have one question I forgot to ask. The APG, is this, so sorry, is this going to be a physical book or is this only going to be digital?
It's designed by the graphic designer to be available digitally. We did contract to have a small amount of them in a paper copy should we need to have them, but we're really relying on it as an interactive online digital book. Mm-hmm.
I think that moves us to item 2C, the ISBE required waiver. Dr. Christensen?
Thank you very much. These are our routine renewals for ISBE waivers or modifications to school code. And so the first that I'll speak of is related to driver education. Since 2008, we have afforded ourselves, by applying for and being approved for the waiver, to count 4 hours of simulator lab time for 1 hour of the required behind the wheel drive time, which needs to be 6 hours. So that would mean 5 hours behind the wheel with an instructor, and then one of the hours would count for those, the simulation lab times. I think that's the information I have. Fabulous. Thank you very much.
The next waiver is regarding our SIP days. Really, this is to provide us with continued flexibility. We are offered the possibility of this waiver every 5 years. It's our time to consider the next 5 years. And it essentially allows us to not be locked in to doing those school improvement days in a half-day format where students have to come for part of the day, teachers teach for part of the day, and then they engage in learning. So if we move forward with this waiver, we have 5 years of flexibility to decide to do that in a half-day or full-day format.
Hearing no questions, we can also move that to the consent agenda. That takes us to item 2D, the Title I school-wide plans discussion.
Yes, and as I'll remind you that we brought forth previously a recommendation to approve the annual waiver for school-wide Title I moving forward for both Anderson and Munhall Elementaries. We recommended that due to the flexibility that we really are afforded by moving to a school-wide plan. We can use those funds more flexibly than if we target them specifically. So we can essentially use that money to assist all students who might be at an academic level of need. I would remind you, too, that we're not just cautioned, but prohibited from supplanting funds. We are only allowed to use the Title I monies to go above and beyond, to supplement what we already do. So, for instance, if we want to add a Title I educator, that's lovely. We cannot do that in lieu of, say, a classroom teacher. If we were already going to pay for a classroom teacher, and we traditionally have in the past, we still have to do that. So by having these school-wide funds available, it gives us flexibility to add above and beyond what each of these schools may need to account for the fact that they have a higher percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged and therefore may need an extra layer of support and resources.
The floor is open.
This is just on the process. I really like the idea of the updates that we did at the board meeting. And I've already expressed my concern to both the board president and the superintendent. We don't want to do the committee work during that period of time. That it just should be brief. So I really appreciate that you took the time offering us to ask our questions to be able to answer, and you've answered them very well from my standpoint. But I am curious is how do we make sure the community knows what questions we've asked and your answers to those questions? Is there a plan to how we might post those, or?
We can always do that, or the board members may ask the questions here, just to make sure that they're very transparent with them. So if you want to ask the questions that you submitted, I would be more than happy to have the team respond to those, or we can answer them right here. And
I mean, you've
because we have
you-
them in front of
yeah,
us.
So I have a document that you've already answered my questions.
Yes.
And you've done a great job in answering those questions. I just want to be sure that people know. So answer my questions, please.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's walk through those a little bit for the benefit of all who are listening. So some of the questions asked are around what are the differences in our instructional practices between targeted and school-wide schools. Also, and then those schools who do not qualify for Title I, do we have flexibility in professional learning, curriculum, and instructional pedagogy? In answers back, we currently do not have any Title I schools operating as targeted assistance programs. All of our schools utilize the same instructional materials and teach from that guaranteed and viable curriculum. Some years, Title I schools elect to use their dollars for additional professional learning around a topic their school community has identified would be most impactful. Another question, what does Title I pay for? If the federal government cuts Title I, what does that mean for our elementary schools, students, and teachers in D303? Concern about the possibility of cuts to title programs and desire to know the impact of the cuts to our schools. Answer there, Title I funds support supplemental educational resources that enhance the school experience and promote equitable outcomes for both low-income and non-low-income students. For school year 2025, for instance, Title I were used to support interventionists, additional social workers, and supplemental materials for math and reading. Should these dollars become unavailable in whole or in part in the future, adjustments would need to be made to how additional support for underperforming students within the low-income student group would be provided. Another question, how does D303 monitor Title I students' progress? We currently monitor their progress as a part of an analysis of school and district aggregate data. Moving forward, we will also monitor progress of students at Title I schools through the lens of our strategic plan priorities as presented at the June 9th regular board meeting as well. Who writes the title grants and who also helped to craft all of these wonderful answers? Dr. Tracy Taylor Moore submits the grants for our title funds, and each school itself convenes a team of staff and parents to develop their Title I plans outlining how they intend to use those Title I funds in the upcoming year. And that was the foundation for the presentation we brought previously.
And then one of the additional questions were from a board member, what are other school districts, are comparables or aspirationals, what are they doing with titles? And we've provided that to the board. For many of them, they do school-wide to give themselves more flexibility, similar to what Yvette Stahl just spoke about earlier for our district, that we want that flexibility for our schools and for our students most specifically.
You know, very interestingly, when you look at those districts, those that have about the same amount of Title I funding or more are split between targeted assistance and school-wide, one in targeted, two in school-wide in terms of the aspirational or the unit district benchmarks. I think from my perspective, I'm comfortable with the continuation of the school-wide usage, given the conversation that the board and admin have had associated with monitoring the efficacy for low SES students, and to really look hard at the programs that Batavia has in place, since they're using targeted assistance, or Killdeer, or one of these other districts that has similar sized challenge or similar sized opportunity with Title I funding, just to see if there are lessons to be learned. And if we see, you know, I recognize that traditionally we've followed this approach, but if there are lessons to be learned from some of these other districts, either in the way they deploy the funding or the way they structure their targeted assistance programs themselves, that we could take, even if we kept the school-wide approach in place.
We'll absolutely continue to have those conversations. Dr. Tracy Taylor Moore and her colleagues in other districts having that conversation about those instructional approaches that are utilized with these dollars, who's making different gains and where. I believe that's what you're, like, continue to look at it, continue to think about how do we use these dollars for our students.
And Dr. Gordon, that's almost exactly my comment, so I won't repeat the rest of it, but I'm interested to see, and it'd be tough to measure, what would the absence of these funds mean, right? So as we're utilizing these resources, what tangible outcomes came specifically from the implementation of these resources, and which ones specifically are we seeing moving the needle with the academic outcomes, so that we can just simply repeat that process, right? So this has been an ongoing discussion, and at some points we were like, sometimes we use it for this, sometimes we use it for this, sometimes we may need a different intervention that we felt needed to be met. So I think just careful consideration, and then and listing each of them out and what we believe the academic outcome was due to, right? And then we can just repeat that. When we find a best practice, we know it moves the needle for these, for these particular schools, and then let's do it again. And I do appreciate, just as an aside, the breakdown of the various schools and how they're utilizing this funding, because, why reinvent the wheel if they've found amazing ways to utilize this funding, or if we have internally as well. And then we can, stretch these dollars to the best of our ability, and really make measurable differences for these student populations.
Thank you, Mr. Kusher.
So for the board, will be the opportunity to put this back on for action at the next board meeting or in the consent agenda? Oh, Ms. Bell, did you?
No, I'm sorry, I just didn't hear you.
I just said we have the opportunity to put this back on the agenda for action or in the consent agenda.
I think we need to put it on action, but we're not sure yet as far as the timing.
Okay.
Correct, Dr. Ward?
Correct. We do need to put this on a special meeting.
Yeah.
So whatever special meeting that comes to, whatever decision we want to do, either consent or action.
Okay, so we can figure that out.
It would, quite honestly, because we have to do a special meeting for it, it'd make more sense if we do action. It would be kind of odd. And I was trying to lead me to the water, but I wasn't drinking right away, so now I finally got it.
Hearing no other comments on the Title I issue, that brings us to item 3, future agenda items.
We are canceling the July L&T meeting, which has been consistent over the last few years. One, to allow for some vacations of our teammates, but most importantly, to prepare ourselves for the fall, which is rapidly approaching. So we will be back together in August.
Hearing no other new business, then we can move to item 3B, adjournment, and adjourn the meeting here at 7:27. Thank you.